Hi everyone, I'm Simon K. Jones, and I hope you all had a good Christmas. I'm just catching up on the recording for this particular chapter, so this voiceover is coming in a little bit late. But yeah, here we go. This is all about landing the plane and how the final 2,000 words might be the most important. Stories start so innocently, a single idea popping into your head. The next thing you know, you've been publishing an online serial for 3.5 years, have written over 250,000 words, and all those pesky readers expect you to come up with some kind of coherent ending like I know what I'm doing. I'm talking hypothetically here, of course, asking for a friend, etc. In my experience, stories tend to start with a single spark, most likely influenced by multiple factors, but the very first moment I start taking a story seriously is a singular ignition. It doesn't stay that way for long. Characters start interfering, then subplots and subtext undermine the foundations, and all those pesky themes start pulling the story this way and that. Before I know it, it's gone from a single strand to a fractal nightmare of infinite complexity. During the first third of a story, this is fine. It's exciting for readers and the writer. Around the middle third, it can start to get a little hairy, somewhat out of control if there are too many strands. It's an engine running at too high an RPM, about to shake itself to pieces. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. You know, the usual. This isn't just me, is it? Please tell me other writers go through this as well. And then the final third of a story approacheth, and this is when it's time to change into the brown trousers. Remember Game of Thrones? Everyone was obsessed with that show right up until its final season, possibly its final episode. It might even have been the final scene, or whenever that awkward "it's all about the best narrative" group scene takes place. It's the most acute example of a dodgy ending undoing the hard work of everything that had come before in the story. The last 5 minutes of a film can make or break it. The last 2,000 words of a novel. The last sentence of a short story. The Great Gatsby's final paragraphs still rent a space in my mind from when I read it as a teenager. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Perfection, not only an astonishing piece of writing by itself, but the perfect end note for the book as a whole. I'm always chasing that feeling in my own stories, to somehow find a way to provide the ideal final words and a definitive ending that lives up to all that came before it, without being contrived or overly comprehensive. Most is left unsaid in Gatsby, but it leaves you with a feeling that is undeniable. As of writing this in mid-December 2024, I'm into the last third of Tales from the Triverse, the epic serial that I've been publishing since 2021. At some point relatively soon, most likely in the first half of 2025, I will finish the project and write the last words for the last chapter. Which means it's time to take all of those characters and themes and subplots and tangential strands and supporting characters and plot details and weave them together into a satisfying, coherent piece. It's easy to use the landing a plane metaphor, but I'd argue it's more like landing a spaceship. You know, the one that was caught back on the gantry a few months back. Still one of the most astonishing things I've ever seen. A level of precision that's hard to comprehend, building on the accumulated knowledge handed down through generations. An inconceivable number of technological breakthroughs over centuries had to happen for that rocket catch to be possible. That's what it feels like to write a novel. Am I going to pull off the catch, or will I have miscalculated? Is the rocket going to miss the arms and explode on the launch pad? At some point, the story has to end, unless it's a truly ongoing serial, in which case you can rinse and repeat forever, like Marvel and DC Comics or TV soaps. I enjoy crafting endings, not least because it signals the end of a project. I'm creatively monogamous in that I try to only have one fiction project going at any one time. That's the only way I can be assured of actually getting to the end of anything. Finishing one project is exciting then, not only because of the inherent accomplishment, but also due to the sudden possibility of the new. Due to writing and publishing as I go, more or less, I have to think about all of this way ahead of time. I can't go back and edit chapters to fix oversights or plot holes. I've talked in a slightly mad fashion about my story loom concept and how I work towards key moments. The idea is that I always know where I'm headed, but can quite happily deviate along the way. It's like having a destination in mind when going for a walk or a drive, while being open to exploring unexpected landmarks encountered on the journey. The biggest key moment of all is the actual ending. That's the final point at which all the strands come together. The strands that matter, at least. I never want to tie up everything, because that's not how life works. There needs to be a sense that the characters and the world will continue after the final page. Some aspects will be left unsaid or unresolved, which aids the overall verisimilitude. Finding which strands to bind together is the real challenge. Every reader will have their own favourite character, storyline and theme. It's impossible to control how an audience reacts and engages with the work. Writing's always felt like problem solving to me. It's a series of complex problems that have to be solved one after another until the story is told. The way I try to make sense of something as gargantuan as Triverse is to first identify those problems and then figure out how to solve them. That's why I end up with all sorts of documents and folders inside Scrivener. So, for example, for Triverse I have a document called Story Ending Summary, and it's a point-by-point outline of where I think the ending should land. It isn't structured into chapters or actual story beats, it's just noting the core points that have to be hit somewhere along the way. It's actually a tidied up version of a much older document that's been around for years from the earliest days of the project, which is called Stuff to Weave into the Finale. It's more of a stream of consciousness, that one, which has evolved and expanded over 3 years. The other documents have been useful along the way. There's something called the Smuggling Ring, which was used a lot in Season 1. The Conspiracy Arc played out over Seasons 1 to 3. All these kind of smaller stories within the larger story. The next step is to filter all of these ideas into an actual narrative structure. I tend to do this in temporary folders within Scrivener with basic placeholder titles and single-line descriptions. The benefit of working in Scrivener is that all of this is very fluid. Chapters can be rearranged by dragging them around, subfolders can be used to keep things tidy, and it's all kept within the primary project. When it became apparent that a flashback story was going to be more involved than I'd originally planned, it became its own subfolder, complete with its own storylines, for example. Breaking everything down into these component pieces, often long before I get to actually writing any of it, is the only way I know how to make sense of a long-form story, chunking it into manageable pieces which can then slowly, painstakingly be put back together again. As with all entertainment, the intention is for the end result to appear effortless, as if it had always had to be that way, as if the story simply emerged, fully formed. Certainly for me, that's not how it works. Writing, and especially crafting a finale, is all about problem after problem after problem and desperately hunting around for solutions. And then hopefully across years and hundreds of thousands of words, it'll all come together beautifully. Thanks for listening. And if you check out the newsletter version over at simonkjones.substack.com, you can see a fun little comic that I did to accompany this post. Okay, do subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and I'll see you on the next episode.